Milo never thought his life would lead him into a palace filled with dragons. He had grown up in a small town on Earth, working in his family's tiny restaurant. He loved to cook. Not fancy food, not expensive dishes, just real, warm meals. That made people feel better after a long day. Soup for the sick, spicy stew for cold weather, and simple bread with butter for anyone who needed comfort. He wasn't famous, but in his town, everyone knew Milo's food was made with care. Then Earth joined the Galactic Alliance. Suddenly, humans weren't just cooking for other humans anymore. They were being offered strange jobs on distant planets. The Alliance had rules and systems, but some roles were too dangerous or too strange for most aliens. One of them was feeding the dragons of the Draken Royal Palace. When Milo received the offer, he didn't believe it at first. The message was short. Galactic Palace of Xyrian requests a human chef for the feeding of royal dragon beasts. Must be calm. Must not run. He asked the recruitment officer what dragon beasts meant. The officer replied, giant creatures that can melt steel with a breath. They are alive, aware, and ancient. You feed them. You do not tame them. Most humans refused. The job came with high pay, but also high risk. Many chefs lasted only a few days. Some left in fear. One fainted before even entering the feeding chamber. But Milo said yes. He didn't do it for the money. He didn't do it for adventure. He did it because something about the message felt honest. The dragons needed to be fed. Someone had to do it. And Milo believed food was a language that crossed all worlds. When he arrived on Xyrian, the royal palace took his breath away. Tall black towers pierced the sky. The air was warm and dry. The walls were carved with images of dragons flying with stars behind them. A tall alien guard named Vorn greeted him. Vorn had gray skin, long arms, and eyes like glass. He said, "You are late. The dragons are hungry." Milo followed him through long halls until they reached a massive metal door. It opened with a loud hiss, and warm air rushed out. Inside was the dragon hall. It was huge, as wide as a football field and 3 times as tall. Stone pillars stood along the sides. Flames burned in bowls on the walls. And at the far end, resting on black stone, were 5 dragons. They were not animals. They were not wild. They were kings in their own right. Each one was different. The largest had gold and red scales, horns like spears, and wings folded at its side. Its eyes glowed like the sun. Another was slim and silver, with sharp claws and a long tail that flicked like a cat's. One of them, smaller than the others, had deep blue scales and looked directly at Milo as he entered. A whisper moved through the room, not with sound, but through feeling. Milo didn't understand the language, but he understood the meaning. Another human, another feeder. He didn't panic. He pushed the cart forward. It was loaded with cuts of meat from different worlds, fruits that shimmered, and bones the size of tree branches. Milo looked at the dragons, then picked up a silver tray with pieces of roasted meat. He took slow steps forward, not rushing, not shaking. When he reached the edge of the platform where the dragons rested, he stopped. The guards near the door watched closely, ready to lock the door at the first sign of danger. Milo placed the tray down and stepped back. He bowed his head just slightly, the way his mother had taught him when greeting someone older. The golden dragon moved, its head lowered. It sniffed the tray. Its hot breath made the food sizzle. Then, after a long pause, it took the meat gently in its jaws and chewed. The others waited, one by one. They came forward, sniffed, and ate. Milo stood still, heart pounding, but he didn't show fear. He watched them closely. He noticed which pieces they liked and which they left. The silver one liked spiced meat. The blue one seemed to prefer soft fruits. The black-scaled dragon didn't eat much but stayed close, always watching him above the hall. On a high balcony, someone else watched too, Prince Gale, the youngest son of the Draken King. He had seen many humans try and fail to feed the dragons. Most treated the task like cleaning a cage. But this one was different. The prince narrowed his eyes. This human did not act like a servant. He acted like a host. After the meal, Milo bowed again and began to clean the trays. None of the dragons growled or moved to stop him. One of them, the blue-scaled one, even lowered its head and let out a low sound. Not a threat, but something else, a sound like a breath of thanks. When Milo left the hall, the guards looked at him with wide eyes. "You're still alive," one of them said. Milo nodded. "They're not monsters. They're just hungry, and they're proud." He went back to the kitchen with his notes. He began writing down details, heat levels, spices, meat types. He wasn't just going to feed them. He was going to learn from them, understand them. Back in the dragon hall, the dragons lay quietly, full and calm. Sorok, the golden one, looked up at the balcony. Prince Kale was still there. "You might be the one." Kale whispered to himself. For the first time in years, the dragons had eaten without anger, without noise, without turning their heads in rejection. It was the beginning of something the palace hadn't seen in a long time. Milo woke up early the next morning. The sky on Xyrian was a deep shade of green, with two suns rising from opposite ends of the horizon. The air was warm and dry, and the palace halls were quiet. Most of the servants stayed away from the dragon hall unless they had orders. No one wanted to be near the beasts, but Milo felt different. He didn't feel fear. He felt curiosity. He stepped into the kitchen, which was large and filled with strange ingredients from many worlds. There were glowing fruits, spices that floated, and meat that changed color when cooked. Some of it smelled sweet, some sour, and some so strong it made his eyes water. He asked one of the kitchen helpers where the dragon supplies were kept. The helper, a small alien with green skin and forearms, pointed to a cold room in the back. Inside, Milo found shelves of raw meat, bones, roots, and thick oils. He picked up what he needed and carried it to the station. Today, he didn't want to just feed the dragons. He wanted to prepare something they would remember. He started with the silver meat from planet Varlin. It was known to hold heat longer. Then other meats. He sliced it carefully and rubbed it with a deep red spice he had brought from Earth. Then he added thin pieces of flamed root from Xyrian, a vegetable that gave off a smoky flavor when cooked over high fire. He didn't use machines. He used real heat, real hands, and real care. When the dish was ready, he placed it on a black metal tray and added slices of fruit around the edges. The colors looked beautiful together. The smell was strong, but not sharp. It smelled like warmth and strength. He placed the tray on the cart and rolled it through the hallway. The guards at the dragon hall opened the door slowly, warning him again. "Don't look them in the eye too long. Don't run. Don't speak unless necessary." Milo nodded. But he had his own way. When he entered the dragon hall, the dragons were already awake. Sorok, the golden one, raised his head and stared. The silver dragon flicked its tail and let out a low growl. The blue one sat still, eyes locked on the cart. Milo didn't wait. He pushed the cart slowly, then stopped near the center of the hall. He lifted the tray and placed it on a raised stone. "I made something special today," he said quietly. "I hope you like it." He stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sork moved. He walked forward, each step heavy but graceful. His nose hovered over the food. He sniffed, paused, then opened his mouth and gently took a piece. He chewed slowly. The room was silent. Sork swallowed. Then, with a sound that was almost like a deep hum, he looked at Milo and lowered his head. The silver dragon moved next. It grabbed to pieces quickly and chewed. The blue one came after, taking only the fruit, eating it one slice at a time. The other dragons joined in, each finding what they liked. There was no growling, no fighting, no fire. Only the sound of chewing and the occasional breath of smoke. Up on the high balcony, Prince Kale watched again. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable, but his eyes stayed fixed on Milo. This human had done something the palace had not seen in years. He had made the dragons share a meal in peace. After the feeding, Milo started to clean the trays. As he worked, he noticed something strange. One of the dragons, the smallest one, with deep blue scales, walked closer to him. Milo froze, holding a tray in one hand. The dragon sniffed the empty tray, and looked at him. It tilted its head, almost like it was studying him. Milo stayed still. Then, slowly, the blue dragon touched its nose to his hand. It was warm. Not too hot, just warm enough to feel alive. The dragon pulled back and returned to its place. The guards saw it. So did Prince Kale. Milo finished cleaning and left the hall, his heart beating fast but steady. He didn't tell anyone what had happened. He didn't need to. Back in the kitchen, he began writing notes. He made a list of what each dragon seemed to prefer. Stork liked strong, smoky flavors. The silver one liked meat cooked just enough to keep its heat. The blue one preferred fruit and gentle seasoning. He added new ideas to test tomorrow. That evening, Prince Kale sent for him. Milo was taken to a smaller chamber, filled with glowing lights and old books. The prince sat at a table, a map of the galaxy spread out in front of him. You served them, not just fed them, Kale said without looking up. Milo stood quietly. Others throw food into the hall and hope to leave alive. You walked in like it was a dining room. Why? Milo thought for a moment. Then he said, on Earth, when we eat together, it means something. It means peace. It means we are not enemies. Kale looked at him now. His eyes were sharp but curious. And you believe that applies to dragons? Milo nodded. They're not just beasts. They watch. They listen. Maybe they remember more than we think. The prince was silent for a while. Then he spoke again. The dragons have not been calm in years. They reject most food. They grow angry easily. But today, they were different. Milo didn't respond. He didn't need praise. He just wanted to keep cooking. Kale stood. You will continue. But be careful. Not everyone wants peace. Not everyone believes in your way. Milo bowed slightly. Understood. As he left the chamber, he passed a group of servants who whispered. As he walked by, some looked impressed, others looked annoyed, a few looked angry. But Milo didn't care. He was not there to win a title or gain fame. He was there to feed, to serve, and to understand and the dragons for the first time. We're beginning to understand him. To the next few days brought change to the palace of Xyrian. The halls that once echoed with the sound of roaring. Dragons had grown quiet. Guards who once stayed far from the dragon hall now stood closer without fear. Even the air inside the palace felt different, warmer, calmer, more alive. The reason behind it all was one man, Milo, the human chef. Every morning, he entered the kitchen before the sun rose. He worked in silence, thinking carefully about each dish. He had learned that the dragons liked food with warmth and color. They didn't just want raw meat. They enjoyed taste, heat, and balance. To Milo, this was not just a feeding task. It was an invitation to create something new. One day, Milo roasted thick slices of thunder beast meat from the mountains of Uruk. He used smoked fruits and bright green herbs from Xyrian's forest edge. He added earth garlic, slow-cooked in oil, until it turned golden. The smell filled the palace kitchen and drifted down the halls. Servants stopped and stared as he worked. No one had ever dared use so many different flavors in a meal for dragons. Most thought the creatures only needed to be kept full, not satisfied. Milo didn't argue with anyone. He didn't give speeches or explain his ideas. He simply cooked and watched the dragons closely. Each day, they accepted his meals. Some even waited near the feeding stone before he arrived, their large eyes watching the doors as if expecting a guest soon. The dragons began reacting in small but clear ways. The silver one, named Vale, no longer growled when the door opened. The black one, Tharn, who once ignored every visitor, now lifted his head when Milo entered. The blue-scaled dragon, Mira, even followed Milo's movements with interest, tail flicking as he placed the trays. Sork, the golden leader of the dragons, was the most mysterious. He rarely showed emotion, but when he liked something, he let out a deep breath of hot steam through his nostrils, a sign of quiet approval. Whispers spread across the palace. Some said the dragons had been tamed. Others said the human chef had used secret tricks. But those who had seen him work knew the truth. He treated the dragons not like beasts, but like respected guests. Prince Kale heard the talk too. From the high rooms of the palace, He listened to the changing voices. He's dangerous, some said. He's earning their trust. He's clever, others said. But the dragons are still dragons. Kale said nothing. He watched. He studied. One evening, as Milo was finishing his notes after feeding, Kale entered the kitchen. Milo stood straight and bowed his head. Your Highness, Kale waved the formality away. I want to see what you're writing. Milo handed over his notebook. Kale flipped through the pages. There were drawings of dishes, short comments on texture, and careful lists of what each dragon liked. There were no long sentences, just simple ideas. But every word showed attention and care. Kale returned the notebook. You write like a soldier, not a cook. I learned to be clear, Milo replied. In cooking, too many words waste time. Taste speaks louder. Kale walked over to the cooking table and looked at the remaining ingredients. He picked up a bright red pepper and held it in his hand. This one, he said, my mother used to use this in soup when I was young. Milo smiled. Spice for the cold nights? Kale looked at him. You've read our history? No, Milo answered. I've tasted it. The prince studied him for a moment, then spoke again. My father once believed food could change minds more than weapons. But war proved faster. Now, no one speaks of food as power. Milo said nothing. He let the moment pass quietly. Kale finally said, tomorrow, I want you to cook something different, not for the dragons, for me. Milo blinked in surprise. Of course, that night, he stayed awake longer than usual, thinking about the request. Cooking for dragons was one thing. Cooking for a prince was another. He wanted the dish to speak of both Earth and Xyrian, a blend of two worlds. A taste that carried memory and meaning. In the morning, Milo gathered ingredients from both sides of the palace. He picked star roots, soft and glowing. He sliced thin strips of earth beef and marinated them with crystal salt and citrus leaves. He roasted them over flame stones that burned without smoke, giving a clean and sharp heat. He added golden sauce made from crushed heat berries and slow-melted butter. He placed the finished dish on a simple white plate and carried it to the prince's private chamber. Kale sat at a round table near the window. He motioned for Milo to place the plate down. No guards. No music. No ceremony. Just the prince and the plate. Kale picked up the fork and took one bite. He chewed slowly. His eyes didn't move. After a long pause, he took another bite. Milo waited without speaking. Finally, Kale looked up. It tastes like memory. Milo smiled slightly. Then I've done it right. Kale nodded once. You're not just a cook. You're something else. I'm just a man with a knife and a warm pan, Milo replied. But Kale didn't agree. He saw more. That evening, Kale called a meeting with his advisors. Not about war. Not about trade. About the chef. Some warned against giving Milo more trust. Others supported him, saying the dragons were calmer than ever. Kale listened. Then he stood and made a short decision. Milo will be given a new title. From now on, he is not just a kitchen worker. He is the royal flamekeeper. His job is not only to feed the dragons, but to protect their trust and guard their bond with the crown. The room fell silent. It was the first time a human had been given a title in the Draken Palace. In the Dragon Hall, Sork raised his head and let out a low, powerful breath. He didn't know human words, but he felt. The shift. Milo was no longer just the one who fed them. He was becoming one of them. The sun over Xyrian was hidden behind thick red clouds. A quiet wind passed through the palace towers, but inside the Dragon Hall, silence was rare. Something was different that morning. Even the guards felt it. Their hands stayed close to their weapons. Their eyes followed every shadow Milo stepped through the kitchen doors, carrying two large trays. On one, he had roasted sky serpent meat from the northern cliffs, cooked with sun spice and layered over soft green roots. On the second tray, he had fruit slices wrapped in smoke leaf, a new dish he had prepared after watching Mira, the blue-scaled dragon. Eat only sweet things reached the Dragon Hall and gave a calm nod to the guards. The doors opened with a hiss. Heat poured out, but Milo walked forward without hesitation inside. The dragons were already waiting. Zorak sat tall, golden scales glowing in the firelight. Mira was curled up near the left side of the chamber, blinking slowly. The silver one, Vale, stood near the center. But something felt off. Vale's tail flicked back and forth. The other dragons were too still. Milo placed the trays on the feeding stones and stepped back on by one. The dragons came forward. They sniffed, they ate, but their eyes kept looking toward the far entrance of the hall. Then it happened at the grate. Doors on the other side slammed open. An ambassador from the planet Veltron walked in, followed by two assistants. His clothes were sharp and his eyes full of Pridith. Guards shouted for him to stop, but he ignored them. He walked straight across the stone floor and raised his voice. I bring a message for Prince Kale. I will not be delayed by beasts or their servant. His words echoed through the hall. Milo's eyes widened. He looked at the dragons. Sork's head lifted. Fire lit behind his eyes. Vel's tail snapped loudly against the floor. Even Mira stood up. Teeth bared. The ambassador didn't understand what he had done. He had walked into their space. He had spoken without respect, and he had insulted the one they now trusted. Milo's heat rose quickly. A deep growl rumbled through the floor. Then a blast of fire roared from Sork's mouth, aimed high into the air. The flames didn't touch the ambassador, but the warning was clear. The guards rushed forward. The ambassador was dragged back, shouting in anger, but the damage was done. Dragons were angry. The air burned hotter. The ground shook beneath their feet. Vale let out a roar that made stone tremble. Milo didn't run. He didn't shout. He picked up a pot from his cart, opened it, and stepped toward the dragons inside. The pot was a fresh stew, still warm, still rich with scent. It was the same recipe he had made 3 days ago. The one Sork had liked. Moss didn't speak. He didn't boast, simply placed the pot on the stone in front of Sork and took a step back. Sork stared at him. Smoke drifted from his nose. His claws scratched at the stone. Then he lowered his head and sniffed the stew. Fire faded slowly from his eyes. Vale moved closer, still tense but silent. Mira came forward, her small form brushing lightly against Milo's side. Her scales were cool, her breath calm. Milo stayed still, one hand on the cart, the other at his sitting by one. The dragons began to eat again up on the balcony. Prince Kale had arrived. He had seen everything. The ambassador had been foolish. He had insulted more than dragons. He had insulted something deeper, the peace that Milo had built, bite by bite, meal by meal. When the flames died down, Kale came down from the balcony and walked toward Milo. Guards made space. The dragons did not move. You stopped them. Kale said. I fed them, Milo replied, and I listened. Kale turned to look at Sork, who had returned to his resting place. His chest rose and fell slowly. The stew pot was empty. I gave that man warnings, Kale said. But he thought power came from rank, not respect. Milo said nothing. Kale nodded. From this day on, no outsider enters the dragon hall without permission, not even royal guests. He looked at Milo. You have done more than serve meals. You've built trust. That evening, the news of the fire spread through the palace. But so did the story of how the dragons had come, not with force, not with chains, but with a warm pot of stew and a human who did not run. Servants whispered Milo's name with new tone, some with respect, others with jealousy, a few with fear. In the kitchen, Milo sat alone, writing in his notebook. Dragons do not react to loud words. They respond to silence, patience, and memory. They remember how they are treated. The next day, the blue dragon Mira did something strange. As Milo placed a bowl of fruit near her, she stepped forward and nudged his hand. Then she dropped a small black scale at his feet. A gift. Milo picked it up and held it carefully. It was warm and smooth, shaped like a tear. He tucked it into his pocket without a word. Prince Kale asked to see him again. Held a scroll in his hand. You're being watched by more than just dragons now, Kale said. Other worlds have noticed. Some call you dangerous, others call you wise. Milo raised an eyebrow. I'm just a cook. Kale shook his head. No, you are. The bridge. From that moment, guards were assigned to protect Milo's movements. Not because he was weak, but because he had become important not just to Kale but to the dragons themselves. And they were no longer just beasts in a halt. They were becoming something greater in Milo. The quiet human from Earth was the first to see. Clearly, the days after the fire in the Dragon Hall were filled with quiet work and careful watching. Milo continued to prepare meals for the dragons, each dish more thoughtful than the last. He had learned their tastes and moods. He had learned to read their eyes and tails, their silent movements. The dragons were changing. So was Milo. Then, one morning, an unexpected message arrived. Prince Kale wanted Milo to come to his private chambers. Milo felt a strange mix of nerves and honor. The prince had never called him for anything other than questions about the dragons or the kitchen. This time, the message said, "Prepare a meal for me, not the dragons." Milo cleaned his tools carefully. He thought about what kind of food a prince might want, but more than that, he thought about what Kale might want to say. Would he test Milo? Would he challenge him? Or simply judge his cooking? Kale's chambers were unlike the rest of the palace. The walls were covered with old tapestries that told stories of war and peace. The air smelled of burning candles and sharp stone. Kale sat behind a simple table, waiting. "I want to taste something new," Kale said, eyes sharp but curious. "Not just food, but a story in a dish." Milo nodded. "I will try my best." Back in the kitchen, Milo worked with purpose. He chose ingredients that told the story of two worlds coming together. Earth's rich, red meat mixed with the glowing spices of Zyrian. He slow roasted the meat to keep its juices. He made a sauce from crushed heat berries, sweet root syrup, and a pinch of salt. On the side, he steamed soft star roots and sprinkled them with crisp herbs. When the meal was ready, Milo placed it on a simple white plate and carried it carefully to Kale. The prince lifted the fork slowly and took a bite. He chewed thoughtfully. His eyes did not move. After a long pause, he took another bite. Milo waited quietly. Kale finally spoke. "This tastes like memory, like the nights of my childhood, like fire and peace." Milo smiled slightly. "That is what I hoped." Kale set down his fork and leaned forward. "Why do you cook like this?" "Because food tells stories," Milo answered. "It speaks when words fail. It brings people closer. It shows respect." Kale's eyes softened for the first time. "You have a strange gift, human." Milo shook his head. "I'm just a man who loves to cook." "But you have done more than feed dragons or impress a prince," Kale said. "You have begun to heal old wounds. You have reminded us that trust can be built with kindness, not force." That day, Kale made a decision that would change Milo's life forever. He stood and announced to his advisors, "Milo shall be known as the Royal Flamekeeper. He will guard the bond between dragons and crown through the art of food." The advisors were silent. Some frowned, some nodded. Kale continued, "This is not just a title. It is a promise to respect and protect, to build peace through care." Milo bowed his head, feeling the weight in honor of the new role. In the Dragon Hall, Sork stirred and let out a low, warm breath. The golden dragon knew something had changed. The human was no longer just a servant. He was a keeper of flame, heart, and trust. That evening, Milo sat by the fire in the kitchen. He looked at his notes and thought about the path ahead. The dragons were no longer wild beasts to be fed. They were partners in an ancient bond. And Milo, the quiet human from Earth, was the key. Milo's new role as Royal Flamekeeper brought respect but also danger. Not everyone in the palace welcomed a human so close to the dragons and the prince. Among the palace's many visitors and allies, one group watched Milo with suspicion: the Korth, a proud species known for their sharp minds and harsh rules. The Korth believed dragons were dangerous. They saw them as weapons, beasts that should be controlled or removed. Milo's growing trust with the dragons worried them. They whispered that the dragons would turn against the humans if left unchecked. One evening, after the palace was quiet, Milo stayed late in the kitchen preparing a new stew for the dragons. He worked carefully, mixing spices and testing flavors. He had learned that small changes could make big differences in the dragons' moods. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the storage room. Milo froze. He heard soft footsteps and a quiet clink. Someone was inside the storage, near the food supplies. Milo stepped forward and caught a figure placing a strange powder into a meat container. "You shouldn't be here," Milo said calmly. The figure spun around, eyes wide. It was a court servant, clutching a small vial of poison. Milo's heart raced, but he stayed steady. He grabbed the vial carefully and crushed it in his hand. The servant ran away before guards arrived. Milo called Prince Kale immediately. "Kale, listen carefully. This is a serious threat. The court want to poison the dragons to prove they are dangerous." Milo felt heavy with guilt. Had he been careless? Could he have let the dragons suffer? The prince put a hand on Milo's shoulder. "We will stop this. You helped save them once. Now, we protect them again. Together." They worked with palace healers to find an antidote. Milo used his knowledge of earth herbs and Zyrian spices to create a mixture that could heal the poison's effects. They gave it to Mira, the young blue dragon who had tasted the poisoned meat. Mira shivered but did not grow angry. After a day, her strength returned. The palace was on high alert. Guards searched for anyone connected to the poisoning plot. The court conspirators were found and expelled. Milo watched the dragons as they recovered. They roared louder than ever, not with rage but with pride. Prince Kale came to the kitchen the next morning. "You did well," he said. "Your cooking saved a life. Your courage saved us all." Milo shook his head. "I just did what I had to do." Kale smiled. "That is why you are Royal Flame Keeper. Not just for food but for trust." From that day, Milo knew his role was more than cooking. It was protecting the dragons, protecting the peace, and protecting the future of two worlds joined by fire and trust. The palace of Zyrian was alive with celebration. The great halls were decorated with glowing banners, shimmering lights, and the scent of fresh herbs and spices. For the first time in many cycles, humans, dragons, and all the palace's peoples gathered together not for war or council, but for a feast. Milo stood in the kitchen, preparing dishes from both Earth and Zyrian. He worked with dragons close by, not as servants, but as helpers. Sork nudged a tray closer with his nose. Mira, the blue-scaled dragon, sniffed the air and flicked her tail happily. Even Vale, the silver dragon, paused to watch Milo carefully slice roasted meat. The feast was Milo's idea. He wanted to show that food could build bridges, that sharing a meal could unite different worlds and species. Prince Kale entered the kitchen and smiled. "You have done more than feed dragons. You have brought peace." Milo nodded. "Food is more than fuel. It is respect, friendship, and trust." As the guests arrived, Milo and the palace cook set the tables. Humans sat beside court ambassadors, and Draken warriors shared space with Zyrian merchants. The dragons rested nearby, their scales gleaming. In the light, when the feast began, Milo served his special dishes: roasted meat with heat berries, star root stew, and sweet fire fruit tarts. The dragons tasted each dish, their eyes bright with approval. The guests tasted the food and smiled. Old fears softened, new bonds formed. Prince Kale stood and raised a glass. "Tonight, we celebrate more than a meal. We celebrate trust. We celebrate unity. And we honor Milo, our royal flame keeper, a human who serves not only food but respect." The crowd cheered. Milo felt warmth inside him. He looked at the dragons, who had become his friends. He saw the prince, who had trusted him. He thought of Earth, of his family, of the small restaurant he had left behind. He had started as a simple cook with one job. Now, he had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in a universe of fire and power, respect and kindness could light the brightest flame. The feast lasted long into the night. Stories were shared, laughter filled the halls, and the dragons roared, not in anger, but in joy. Milo smiled as Sork licked his plate clean. He had served them more than food. He had served them trust.